you have had 1 week in office, certainly a very eventful week. It began with your objection to counting Pennsylvania's electoral votes. Can you explain why you chose to do that?
Yes, and it has been an amazing week here in Washington, D.C. Yes, and the reason I did that was this wasn't about voting up or down on all the electoral votes. The only states called into question were those that had constitutional issues. For instance, in Pennsylvania, the Secretary of the Commonwealth actually made rules that usurped the state legislature. And by doing that, they added extra days on when they would accept absentee ballots. And those are state statutes. Those are put into law by the legislators. So we only objected to the states that had a constitutional question. And that is why I stood, because I told the people of New Mexico I would always stand for our Constitution. And the constitutionality of some of these states were brought into question. And that's why I signed on to the objections.
And then, as we all know, the week continued to grow, more eventful. And Wednesday marked violence at the Capitol, the group of protesters, the mob that infiltrated the Capitol. Can you talk about what that experience was like?
Yes, it was actually one of the most frightening days of my life. We were obviously in session when that happened, and I'm so grateful for the Capitol Hill Police that were there to keep us safe. We did not know everything that was going on outside the walls of the actual House floor, but as time went on, we could hear the noise, we could hear more and more people, and we could tell by the Capitol Hill Police that were in the chambers that something was not going to go well. And while we were there, at one time we were asked to take cover. Another time they came back and said, no, everybody take a gas mask, get ready to take cover, because again, here we are, and there's no windows or anything, so we can't see what's happening in the statutory hall and in the halls of the Capitol. And then finally, and I'm again grateful for the Capitol Police, they had a door they were able to get open for us, and so they were just pushing us to run down the stairwell into one of the tunnels. And of course, we were all outside of the floor before the people busted into the door and got onto the House floor.
What was your reaction to learning they had actually infiltrated the building, learning of the violence that came out of it, and learning to ultimately about the deaths of 4 people, including that Capitol police officer?
Right, absolutely. And I know there are some people in New Mexico that haven't either watched or seen our statements, but we were very clear on coming out immediately, both on the official side and on our campaign side, that we do not condone the violence. We believe that those that breached security, came in and caused damage not only to the Capitol, but to our police law enforcement officers should be held accountable. And another law enforcement Capitol Hill police officer passed away just over the weekend. So there were 2 Capitol Hill police officers that ultimately lost their lives. And again, we are just, our hearts and prayers go out to their families, because we are so grateful for their sacrifices and for their willingness to bridge the gap between keeping us safe and putting their own lives in peril.
You are a very vocal supporter of President Trump. It's been a very eventful few weeks on the national front, and he did make a speech to a group of supporters, and then ultimately we saw many Trump supporters ultimately come to the Capitol. That violence followed, the deaths followed. Just what is your reaction to learning that many of those were Trump supporters who, of the president that you speak very highly of and defend consistently?
Right. Yeah. And, we watched the president's remarks on TV before we went to the House floor. Many of us did. And I personally have seen a copy of the transcript of his speech. And he did say to, let's go down to Capitol Hill, but he also said peacefully. And so here we are again looking at the bigger picture. I'm not condoning any type of violence, whether it's on Capitol Hill or around our cities, around the nation, whether it's Minnesota, Chicago, wherever. We all have to have some self-accountability. And so I am so upset over what happened, as I know everyone is. But, we have to look at the bigger picture and we are in a time of unrest. And I am looking forward to working on legislation and issues that are important to the district. So, preparing to protect our oil and gas jobs. I've signed on to a right to life bill, a hold China accountable legislation. Let's start putting that unity. We're all talking about it. So let's start coming together and build unity amongst both sides of the aisle and work for the American people.
The president has continually stated that, the election results were stolen from him. How do you feel about that statement?
I feel that the electoral votes were counted and they were certified by Congress, and we will have a new president in office on January 20th.
How much responsibility do you believe the president has in, inciting any of the actions of the protesters from last week?
Personally, I think just looking at the picture, the big picture where we are as a nation, I really don't personally feel that we can hold President Trump accountable for all of this. We've seen such unrest all over the nation for the last number of months. And we need to have some self-control, and there needs to be personal accountability. But I am not condoning this violence that took place in Washington, D.C. on the 6th, nor am I condoning it for the other communities throughout the nation that saw violence erupt in their communities over the summer.
Of course, you are part of the House now, and several members of the House are seeking to impeach the president as we speak. How do you plan on voting tomorrow? Do you believe that the impeachment vote is a waste of taxpayer time, or do you believe it's a valuable move at this point?
I don't think it's necessary. We will have a transition in leadership to this nation, a new commander-in-chief in less than 10 days. I think right now, both sides of the aisle, we've all come out and talked about getting America back together, bringing that sense of unity back together. Why aren't we just pushing through now to put a brand new horizon in front of the American people? And again, work on bills, legislation that are good for the American worker, good for the American business owner, and let's not fan the flames. It's unfortunate what happened last week, but we have an opportunity right now to set a new stage and to set a new directive for the nation. And I think by bringing up trying to do the impeachment right now, or even incite the 25th Amendment, it's not healthy. I don't think it's right for our nation. I think we all need to work on bringing the nation together.
What are the implications of the vote if the House does vote to impeach the president?
Well, it's hard to know right now. Obviously, I'm in the minority, so there's a very good chance it will pass the House. But then we don't know if the Senate's going to take it up. The Senate is actually in recess till the 21st. So there's still a lot more questions than answers. And to speak to it right now, I can't really, because we just don't know what the process is going to look like after tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Moving to the local level, Otero County Commissioner Cory Griffin is attracting some backlash for some comments he made. Of course, he was part of the protest, and then he made comments. His exact quote was, "There's going to be blood flowing out of that building." You and Commissioner Griffin are obviously, in the past you've been close. You've said that you appreciated his endorsement and welcomed it from Cowboys for Trump. What do you believe about the comments that Commissioner Griffin made?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed in Cory Griffin's comments. I don't think anybody should be inciting or even talking about violence on our Capitol Hill or any area. And I don't condone his comments. I think they were reckless. But again, the organization itself is built up of a number of great patriots. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's some great men and women that belong to the organization as a whole, but I don't agree with Cory Griffin's comments as late. And again, that is not bringing the nation together. We need sensible minds and common sense and a true dialogue, but not to continue to make people seem as though he's trying to incite more violence. And so I'm unfortunately he made those comments, but again, we have condemned all of the violence that took place in Washington, D.C. last week.
Do you believe that Commissioner Griffin should continue to hold office in a community that you know and love so well?
That question has been up several people have talked about it, and right now I'm just focused on trying to do my job as a new member of Congress and work on the legislation that people sent me here to try to pass and get through, so I really can't speak to it.
As you touched on, this nation is incredibly divided. Southern New Mexico is divided, and I'm sure you've seen some of the calls for you to resign from office, some of the editorials from the Sun News and from local politicians. What is your response to those calls for you to resign?
I appreciate that we live in a nation where everybody has an opportunity to express their opinions. And some of these issues that we've been dealing with just in that first week of Congress have been very complex. And I do think there were some misunderstandings, as to what the votes meant and how the bills were shaped. But you know what? I am here to represent the people of New Mexico, and I am just going to stay grounded in my faith and my ability to do what is right and make the right decisions. And obviously, we're staying very connected with the district, talking to elected officials, leaders. We continue to have a very good presence on social media and Facebook and emails so that we can communicate with the district. But again, we're in times that are very different than what we've seen in years past. So for me, it's about continuing to communicate. I understand there's going to be issues that we may disagree on, but my job is to do the very best that I can and protect New Mexicans, America, and our Constitution.
I want to touch really quickly on Commissioner Griffin's comments, his exact quote, that blood will be flowing. I mean, do you anticipate any sort of additional violence or additional protests at the Capitol building?
I can't know that for sure, but we've had, what I can tell you is there are over 6,000 National Guard troops in the capital city right now. The security, the fences that have been put up since January 6th are incredible. And so I'm grateful for the men and women of law enforcement and our National Guard. They're here keeping us safe every day and watching us and watching to make sure that we're kept out of harm's way. And I hope that we can see peaceful transition. I hope that we can see peaceful movements going forward. And I hope that we can really put the value of Americans first and start doing a job for them and building a stronger economy and protect our jobs in New Mexico.
Moving forward, obviously you're in a different political party than the president-elect, but how do you foresee your interactions with him, your work with him as a lawmaker?
Well, I think, and I said this before I got elected, and that was a question someone asked, should he win? And it is my responsibility to roll up my sleeves and work with his administration and make sure that we're talking about the issues important to New Mexico workers, New Mexico families, New Mexico business owners. For instance, the oil and gas industry, that is such an enormous part of not only our state's budget, but the jobs that it provides. So we will find ways to come together and have shared dialogue and work together on issues that will be beneficial for New Mexico.
Okay, any questions, Tom?
Congresswoman Herrell, are you planning on attending the inauguration?
Yes, we're all invited, but right now we're waiting because obviously in light of last week, and then there are very strict COVID requirements here in the capital city. So I think personally it'll be a much smaller group than what we've seen in the past. So we'll see. I believe they will have a place for us possibly, but we're waiting to see how many people will actually get to go just by virtue of a security issue and COVID requirements. So we'll see.
If you are allowed to go, will you go?
I will go, yes.
If you are allowed to go.
Right.
Moving forward, I mean, obviously a very tumultuous start to your first term in Congress, but what are your priorities moving forward, moving past this?
Yeah, my priorities haven't changed since I got elected. My priorities are the people of New Mexico. And one thing I'm very proud of is to have signed on to the pro-life bill. That is the bill it's the Born Alive Act. But really, the first bill that I signed on to was to protect our oil and gas industry and those jobs. And the bill actually is to protect drilling on public lands. I also have signed on to Congressman Jim Banks' faith in our elections. So it's Restore Our Democracy, which is a bill that would bring transparency and clarity to our election process. That's very important to people right now. And I've also signed on to the Hold China Accountable Act, the resolution there. So there's a lot of things moving that are beneficial for New Mexico, and we continue to work with our ranching communities right now to see how we can improve grazing operations for them. So we are really doing the people's work, even though it's been a little bit clouded by some of these other things. But the priority for me has not changed. It's the people of New Mexico.
Great. Any other questions, Tom?
Last thought for you, Congresswoman, and I thank you so much for your time. How can you address the people of this country, the people of your district, the people of your state, when it comes to healing? Because there's been so much turbulence, there's so much concern, so much fear for not just maybe the next 4 years, but for the immediate future. How do you address this as in a way where people can understand we need to heal, and in particular, maybe if you want to address people in general or specific the party?
Right. Well, great question. And I said this as I was running for office. We are truly fighting for our one nation under God. And I believe this is kind of our Nehemiah moment. And I believe we need to continue praying for our president-elect, for the healing in our nation. And let's have civil discourse. Let's have real conversations that benefit the people of America and put some of this divisiveness aside. And if we're really true to our word about bringing unity to the nation, it starts with the leadership on Capitol Hill. And it's the way we move forward. And that's what the next 4 years is going to look like, in my opinion. So I've always said we've just got to keep praying for our nation and our leaders. And let's try to start this new 4-year term now for President Biden-elect with civil discourse and a plan that really benefits the American people.
And finally, politicians and groups across the country, they labeled last Wednesday's events a failed coup. How much faith do you have in the fabric of our democracy in this moment?
I have all the faith in the world. We live in the greatest country in the world, regardless of what happened, and we are better than what was displayed last week. So I have all the faith that we will find our way through this. This is history in the making, but I believe we will be better for it on the other side, and we will come together as a stronger America.
Mm-hmm.